Hour 23, text C, from the Phaedo of Plato.
Yep.
And this is the first time we're looking at a passage from this amazing work,
Right.
which is so many things. It not only tells all about the last days and hours of Socrates, but it also is an introduction to Plato's theory of forms 101, so to speak, and so many other things. Yeah. And it has such a stirring finish where Socrates finally drinks the hemlock. But let's start where one speaker, who is the non-Athenian, says, were you yourself, Phaedo, in the prison with Socrates on the day when he drank the poison? And I'm emphasizing Pharmakon as poison because, yes, it's poison in some contexts, but it's the cure in other contexts.
That's right.
And it's more basically drug or medicine even, and that's where we get the word pharmacology, pharmacist, and so on and so forth.
That's it.
But let me immediately fast forward to the contextualization of the death of Socrates, how this is going to happen potentially at a time that's one of the most sacred chronological zones of the rhythm of the city of Athens.
Right.
And we're going to see this passage again, but I'd like to focus this time around on the way the word theōriā is used.
Okay.
And we hear that Theseus, who's a proto-hero of Athens, saves the young Athenians and saves the city-state of Athens, but he himself is saved. We'll get back to what exactly it means to be saved.
Right.
But I'm thinking more about how he commemorates this salvation. And there it is. Let's start at 58b. He, Theseus, saved the Athenians, and he too was saved.
Right.
So that's repeating that word. And they were said to have vowed to Apollo at that time that if they were saved, the third time we see this concept, they would make an annual sacred journey to Delos. And I'm translating theōriā here as sacred journey.
Right. This is the typical kind of vow where you do it in exchange for something that you've gotten. Yep.
Yes. And when Claudia and I were talking about sacred journeys in a previous conversation, I was saying that we have to understand that Plato's own philosophical agenda are focusing on what theōriā means in his own worldview, which is pretty close to what we mean when we say theory.
Yep, yep.
And that's the borrowing. But if you look at pre-philosophical uses of theōriā, this is what it means, sacred journey.
Yes.
And not just any sacred journey, something that involves the whole community and something that really determines how you behave during the time that the sacred journey happens. Now, I know Theseus went to Crete.
Right.
He rescued the Athenians in Crete, then he comes back to Athens. But in terms of the ritual trip is no longer to Crete, it's simply to the sacred island of Delos, which has a special meaning.
Which is about halfway. Yep.
Which is halfway.
Yep.
But it has a very special meaning for the Athenians. And so what the ritual that corresponds to the myth is all about is a sacred journey simply from Athens to Delos and back to Athens. There's a ship of state that makes the journey. There is an annual purification every time the sacred journey is made.
Right.
And because it's a purification, you can't have the pollution of executing prisoners.
Right, in the city-state, anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yep.
And so that's why Socrates is spared.
Right.
For now.
For now, yes. Until the ship comes back.
Until the ship comes back. So what does he do while the ship is on its own theōriā, its sacred journey? He is philosophizing about the theory of forms, about the immortality.
Yes.
He's doing his own theōriā, and his own theōriā corresponds very closely to what we think of as theory.
Exactly.
Or shall we say it in a more sublime way, contemplation of the divine, contemplation of universal
Right.
truths as revealed by the cosmos if you just pay attention to those truths.
Right.
That's what theōriā is. And so while the ship of state is sailing to Delos and sailing back from Delos, purifying the whole community,
Right.
Socrates is having his own journey, a journey of a soul,
Right.
which is dialogue.
Right.
Let's put it that way. Instead of saying philosophizing, can't we just say dialogue?
Right.
And this is certainly what in text A, Herodotus is talking about when he describes this sacred journey of Solon.
Right.
And even Socrates in the Apology is talking about his own sacred journey
his
when he's
plan A.
alive.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And that's in a larger context, but there too you could apply this terminology of theōriā.
Yep.
And
there's also the terminology of purification associated with the theōriā, right?
absolutely. So to undergo this experience is to experience a purification on the level of ritual. It's to experience a spiritual purge, if you want to think medically about it.
Right.
And the beautiful thing about the results is that the whole community is revitalized, reintegrated.
Yes.
And one last thing, I love the fact that when this sacred voyage begins,
Right.
as far as Athenian myth and ritual are concerned, the priest, the high priest, garlands
He puts the wreath on the
the ship.
Yeah.
And more specifically, it seems to be the back of the ship, not the front of the ship. It's the kind of send-off that makes us think about beautiful pieces of visual art
Right.
that show how garlanding of ships is a sacred preliminary to voyages,
Right. Right.
voyages of the soul.
The word for send-off being pompē, which is a very ritualized
Which
thing
is
always.
a beautiful word, pompē, because
Yeah.
it's not just sending somebody off, you can go with them.
That's right. That's right.
So it's both sending them and going with them.
Right. When we think of sending, we think of putting a letter in a box. That's
Yes,
not what it
and
is.
then we stay behind. No, this is taking part in the whole
Yes,
procedure.
exactly. Beautiful.
So I think we can wind up this particular conversation by looking at the last words that I highlight here.
Right.
And this was the reason why Socrates spent a long time in prison between the time of his trial and the time of his death. That is the framework of theōriā, sacred voyage, and theory as
Voyage of the
we
soul.
understand it philosophically.
Yep. Yep. Beautiful.